there were children left behind. I know that George Bush had this whole policy called No Child Left Behind, but many children were actually left behind, and we need look no further than our dear friend Tyrese. Now, I understand that people have the right to say what they want to say. I understand that people have the right to their opinion and their perspective, but when you have a whole ass platform and you get on said platform with someone as notable as one attorney, Benjamin Crump, and then you spout off all of this information that is absolutely fundamentally not true, and you then hit post and you post said misinformation on the Beyonce's internet, then people like me who have a platform, who know better, have a responsibility, an obligation, if you will, to correct the record. So Tyrese, as we heard already in a previous clip, got on Beyonce's internet and basically said he was very upset that the Asians have a hate crime bill legislation. Hate crime legislation for the Asians. I just want to say at the very beginning, there is no legislation, either federal or any state that I know of, that is an Asian hate crime bill. We do have a COVID-19 hate crime bill that was promulgated because 7 Asian women were massacred in a sauna, and Asian people were getting their asses destroyed during COVID because y'all's former president kept calling COVID the China, and he would put China in connection to COVID, and he did all sorts of terrible things. And so Asian people was getting their asses kicked. I'm one of those people who believes if you're getting your ass kicked, then it's all right for you to have to have some protections. I don't mind that. But what has happened, unfortunately, is that people have seen that there was a piece of legislation signed into law that talks about a lot of the awful things that Asian people were experiencing, and they believe that that is a hate crimes legislation for Asian people. That number one, that is fundamentally not true. There was a hate crimes legislation that was passed during COVID-19 that added an additional staffer, one additional person who got an extra job so that basically they could make hate crimes reviews even quicker. But it wasn't a one staffer who was there to review hate crimes even quicker just for the Asians. They were there for all of us. Everybody benefited from that particular piece of legislation. And that was the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act, which was codified at 34 USC section 30501. We're going to get a little wonky. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but I just need us to understand what hate crimes legislation does exist. And I need us to be able to be well versed in this, because your cousins and them who were children left behind, they don't read. Unfortunately, Tyrese does not read things and does not know things. And I don't know why. And I'm assuming later on in that video clip between him and attorney Benjamin Crump, he was corrected. I have asked those of you who have watched it if he was ever corrected, and y'all told me he wasn't. I'm not watching it, but I'm hopeful that at some point attorney Crump corrected the record. But I just wanted to run through the hate crimes legislation that exists, because now that I am also one of the members of the New York State Commission on Reparations, I'm getting a lot of people, a lot of trolls who are reaching out to me to say, we demand legislation specifically for us because the Asians got a hate crimes bill. We can't even get reparations. And so clearly children have been left behind, and the grown-ups too. So I just want to quickly run through what some of this the legislation that is specific to Black people, because a lot of you are demanding legislation that you already have. And when Ice Cube gets on Beyonce's internet and Janelle Monáe's internet and says that you shouldn't be voting and not asking for nothing, I guess in response to Plies saying that y'all got all these questions for Kamala Harris, y'all ain't never asked nobody, an elected official, what they was going to do for you, making it seem as though we don't get things when we vote for them, it's problematic, and it's leaving children behind. So we're going to correct the record. Let's start. 1968, a hate crime statute that prohibited violence against people for their race when they are engaged in federally protected activities like serving on a jury, like registering to vote, like going to actually vote, like doing any of the things that you are allowed to do as being protected by the Constitution. When you do those things and you're Black, and somebody sees you doing those things and they want to kill you, like Medgar Wiley Evers passing out information to register people to vote, and then he's assassinated in his driveway, that would be an action that would be protected by this legislation. Why do we have this legislation? Because Black people was getting their asses handed to them by white people who were destroying our communities whenever we were doing things like registering people to vote, actually going to the voting booth to cast said vote. There are entire massacres, the Ocoee massacre in Florida. There are so many massacres that took place because Black people went to vote. And in 1968, Black people advocated for and got hate crimes legislation that basically said when you're Black and you're doing this shit that is protected by the Constitution, and somebody decides to attack you because you're Black and doing this thing protected by the Constitution, then that is going to be considered a hate crime. Legislation in 1968. Hate crime to interfere with the purchase of a home. Because buying a home was a really big deal, particularly at the height and the really beginning of integration. Purchasing a home in a non-black community was a really big deal. Remember, prior to the 1968 Fair Housing Act, when black people were trying to buy homes, we had been subjected to redlining. Redlining was a process that banks used to basically draw a big bright red map around a bright red circle around our communities and said, anybody who's in this community, they black. And we're not going to sell them no houses. We're not going to give them no bank loans. We're not even going to show them houses. In fact, we are going to go so far as to put covenants, racist covenants in our housing contracts that say, I'm not going to, as the realtor, show a black person this home. You can't show them this home. And if any of you do it, you'll be kicked out of the real estate industry. Like, that was a whole thing. While white memas and papas were able to use the GI Bill and the Homesteading Act, all these other pieces of white affirmative action to go out and get homes, to create intergenerational wealth for themselves. When we did that, we could be killed. And so we also had passed into law the 42 USC section 3631, which is essentially making it a hate crime to interfere with the purchase of a home. That was because of what black people were experiencing. Then in 1998, we also had, after the murders of James Byrd Jr., his body was attached to a truck in Texas. And these racists drove through the streets of this town and literally had his body bouncing on the cement, dragged behind the truck. Brutal hate crime. Absolutely brutal hate crime. This was in 1998. Also, what happened in that year, and that gentleman, his name was James Byrd Jr. Also, what happened in that year was Matthew Shepard, a white gay man, brutally murdered. I remember this like it was yesterday. The news was out. We were outraged. It was brutal. Absolutely brutal. And as a result, we got another piece of legislation, the Matthew Shepard James Byrd Hate Crime Prevention Act. And this is an act that helps law enforcement agencies to fight hate crimes with additional funding, technical assistance to investigate and to prosecute hate crimes. It's got 3 subsections, and it was signed by President Barack Obama. What is that? 3 so far? We got 3 pieces of legislation so far? Yeah. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. And then we had also signed into law the damage to religious property. The damage to religious property, which is codified in 18 USC section 247. This is a piece of federal legislation that makes it a hate crime when you commit an arson against a religious institution. I'm sorry, against the church. Not a mosque. I heard Roland Martin say this. It wasn't about mosques. It wasn't about temples. It wasn't about synagogues. It was churches. And it wasn't all churches. It was black churches, because black churches had been experiencing extreme forms of arson, racist terrorism, arson. And as a result of the churches being burned down, the resources being lost, there was hate crimes legislation passed into law that would make it a crime, a federal hate crime, if you were participating in an arson as against a black church because the church happened to be black. That's 4 pieces of legislation. That's before we get to the COVID-19 Act, guys. Before we get to the COVID-19 Act. And again, the COVID-19 Act, which was not an Asian hate crimes legislation. Can we say it all together? COVID-19, not an Asian hate crime law. I know that wasn't good to say together, but that's what I meant. There was no such thing. Tyrese, brethren, child left behind. There was no Asian hate crime legislation. I don't know why in 2024, your community has not loved you enough to make sure that you do not get on the stage and embarrass yourself in this way. I don't know why you do not have enough people in your corner who are willing to say, bruh, let me let you know before you embarrass yourself and make us all look really stupid. Make it look like we was all left behind. Before you go around convincing other young black people to listen to what you have to say, put the phone down, bruh. I'm sorry you don't have enough people in your circle who either read things and know things, but at that ripe old age that you sitting at, you too old to be this misinformed. Ice Cube, again, nothing against you, but you too old to only show up to be the Jill Stein of black people. You just too old to be showing up around elections talking about you shouldn't vote and providing comfort for people who are confused about voting. You too old and we too black, and this struggle is too serious. Voting is not about waving a magic wand and getting Wakanda. Voting is about picking the people who will make the resource distribution decisions. As I've said every day since ending in Y, every day. Politics is the science of giving away resources. What are some of those resources? Let's go right back to see what some of the resources were that the Biden-Harris administration was able to adjudicate. Because again, if politics is about giving away the resources, voting is about putting people in power who will give away the resources in ways that benefit us or in ways that will harm us the least. So again, when people say, what you getting for your vote? I don't believe that people are out here telling you to vote without asking for nothing. And if people are telling you to vote without asking for anything, don't listen to them. That part Ice Cube said was true. That was true. But again, here is just a sample of some of the resources that were given away as a result of enough people coming out to vote to put Biden-Harris in office. Economic recovery that created 2.6 million jobs for black workers. I'm going to have to say this till I'm blue in the freaking face. They helped black families build wealth. Black wealth is up by 60% relative to pre-pandemic. Pre-pandemic, not relative to pre-Biden, relative to pre-pandemic. This is the largest increase in black wealth on record. They have cut child poverty for black children in the year 2021. They cut it in half with the child tax credit. They have reversed the infrastructure divestment. They added $4 billion. You remember how our communities were destroyed when highways came through, and our people being destroyed for lack of knowledge looked exactly like our communities being destroyed for lack of infrastructure and transportation? They have taken $4 billion to repair the harm that was allowed to happen as a result of those infrastructure decisions, those racist infrastructure decisions. They have created it's the fastest creation of black-owned business in more than 30 years under the Biden-Harris administration. The Small Business Association, their loan guarantee program expanded. Through the Treasury's State Small Business Credit Initiative, they have invested $10 billion to expand capital and invest in early stage businesses in all 50 states, which benefits us directly. When it comes to student loan forgiveness, public service forgiveness, when it comes to black farmers, finally getting a piece of what they are owed. These are examples of resources that we get when we put people into office who can't stand our black or who are not in opposition to us as black people. When you put people in office who can't stand our black asses, we get terrible things in return. Resources matter. And here are some resources that the Harris-Walz administration or campaign is talking about what they want to do. Again, politics is about distributing resources. Here are just some of the resources that Kamala Harris says she wants to contribute. She's talking about a $25,000 down payment support program for first-time homebuyers. I know, Ice Cube, you can post from lovely cottages. I know, Tyrese, you can get online from your lovely mansions. But a lot of us who have to buy homes aren't able to do so because we can't come up with the down payment. Kamala Harris says she wants to give a $25,000 down payment assistance program. She wants to provide $6,000 to American families to support them when they have a child in its first year of life. She wants to return the $3,600 child tax credit so that when you are raising that child, you have the resources to do so. She's talking about black maternal health and decreasing the cost of medicines for all of us. And I don't know if you've had any time to pay attention being so left behind, but if you paid attention, you would realize that black people really struggling with a disproportionately bad set of outcomes when it comes to our health. So you're talking about investing in education for our kids. I know y'all can afford to have, kids with whomever. I know you can afford to educate your kids wherever, but a lot of us can't. We can't afford to both live and make sure that our kids go to a good school. So having access to investment in education matters for us. Now, I believe Reese, or maybe it was L. Joy Williams, recently said, stop voting like people who ain't got your pockets. You need to vote like people in your pocket bracket. I know in America, we like to legislate on what will come. Like a lot of us don't want these capital gains taxes because you scared you're going to get taxed on capital gains when you buy or sell a house. Baby, unless you're making $100 million, them capital gains ain't got nothing to do with you. I'm going to need you to worry about things that's in your economic bracket. Worry about what's in your economic. I'm doing pretty well financially. I ain't in that bracket. I ain't got nothing to worry about with capital gains. You know who do? The wealthy people, like a Ice Cube or a Tyrese. They might be worried about capital gains. It might be more financially beneficial for them to have a Donald Trump into office. But we have to be clear about what it is we are doing and who we are listening to. I told y'all on Friday, after Labor Day, be ready. The troll's going to be out. The misinformation going to be out. This is no shade to any of these people personally. And I do not need celebrities to agree with me. Some of y'all already, before y'all even get on talking about you don't mind a celebrity when they talking about what you agree with. No, I don't mind celebrities talking when they are factual. when they have respected our community enough to actually get the record straight. Because what often ends up happening is they put out information that is just whole ass wrong. And we believe it because they on a mic and they make us feel good when they drop a new track. But at the end of the day, we are the ones left disempowered. So if politics is about giving away resources, and the question is, which of these people, either the Trump administration, the Trump campaign, or the Harris-Walz campaign, which of these people is going to give away resources in a way that benefits us the most and harms us the least, then choose and vote accordingly. But please, dear brethren, for the love of God, please stop proving George Bush correct. Because despite the fact that his policy was called No Child Left Behind, you, dear brethren, clearly may have been left behind. And it makes it really difficult for those of us who have to then clean up on Aisle America to correct the record and make sure that we are not disenfranchised. Because my elders are going to need a place to stay. My elders are going to need access to medicines. And last I checked, neither Tyrese nor Brother Ice Cube have given out any information on how they will be housing, supporting, or otherwise financially enabling our community to thrive if a Donald Trump gets back into office. And when your business partners are Steve Bannon and you're palling around with Tucker Carlson, good brothers, we just gonna have to put you to the side. And it's no shade, but we can't allow our love for celebrity to sabotage our love for community. Today's Umoja. Unity. Strive for and maintain unity within the family, community, nation, and race. We have 4 pieces of federal hate crimes legislation already. If you're going to talk about tangibles, you might want to actually start by knowing which ones you already have. 866-801-8255. 866-801-TALK is the number.